Good evening. I call the special meeting of the Columbus City Council for September the 8th, 2021 to order. Welcome everyone. We appreciate everybody being here tonight. Thank you for wearing your mask and properly social distancing for us during this time. Council members, we have our policy agenda before us, but before we go any further, let me ask Councilman Mickens, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Yes, sir. All hearts and minds clear. Oh, gracious and humble Father, we come to you right now, just thanking you, O Lord. We thank you for life, and we thank you for life more abundantly. We thank you, Lord, for the leaders of this great city that we live in. We ask you, Father, to continue to strengthen them, blessing them, and lead and guide them into the direction you would have us to go. Bless right now, Father. Bless this meeting. And we pray right now, everything, Lord, be done decent and in order. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. First, we want to discuss and approve the proposed tax levies. I will ask our Mark Alexander, our interim chief operating officer, to please come to the podium. After he presents this information, we will also allow the members of our citizens that are here, members of the press, or anyone who wants to answer questions during this time will be also able to ask questions.
Good evening. So we're here tonight to consider and approve a proposed ad valorem tax levy increase. I've provided some documentation to the best of my ability based on historical information as to the basis for the levy increase. If you look in your packet, I provided some notes, and I'll run through it briefly. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. The city sold its urban development bonds and increased the millage by 1 mil in 2018, and then a 0.75 mils in 2019. There was a prospective 0.75 increase that was based on the schedule that was supposed to occur in 2020 but did not. According to the schedule, that was at a assumed mill value of 192,000. We're at 195, so to keep the schedule the same, we proposed a 0.75 increase to fund that, and those funds are coming out of the general fund. They're not being paid as special obligation bonds. So, number two, the disability relief fund for firemen and police officers decreased. That's advised by PERS annually. And then number three, the general obligation fund was increased by 2.59 mils to fund the city's current bonded debt. And I'll get to that as we get to the evidence or to the support documentation. If you flip to the next page, you can see the proposed millage for this upcoming fiscal year as broken down. The city is the levying authority for not only to fund the city, but also to fund the city school district, Columbus Municipal School District, so you can see their millage. I'll get to that too. I've provided some support documentation in the back there. Right now, we are asking for a total levy to support the city of Columbus at 54.11 mils. That includes the aforementioned two increases that I mentioned, and then also the decrease. If you turn over to the next page, you can see the general revenue and operations millage went from 37.22 mils up to 37.97. There's your 0.75 increase to support the urban renewal bonds. You can also see the decrease in the disability and relief fund that I mentioned, from 5.82 down to 5.35 as recommended by PERS. And then you can also see the increase in the GO bond millage that I mentioned. not skipping ahead, but to get to the GO bond, which is on the next table that I have is number 3, which is essentially, it's not essentially, it is the list of all the city's bonded debt, not to include the bond refund that you all just voted on. I mean, the bond is there, the refund is not factored in there. Based on, I did hear from Mr. Lynn Norris, and based on the bank that is going to buy the bond has agreed to the schedule that you all approved, which was to have deferred savings. So essentially, the payment is going to remain the same. The principal and interest payment for that refunded bond will remain the same. We'll just get the savings on the back end when the bond is paid off. If you look here, and you know, this is kind of, we did this in the beginning stages to set the budget, of course. We have to set this revenue. This is a primary revenue stream for the city, is the ad valorem tax levy. If you look down the side here on the tax millage needed to fund the city bonded debt, all the way in the right-handmost column. If you get down to, you can find, I should have numbered these, but it's 10.79 mils. There is a proposed increase all the way up to 10.9 mils to service the P&I. Now, when I originally figured this, I knew that we were going to do the refund, and the prospective schedule that I had on the refund was to do a annual refund where you would get, I think it was an average of like $22,400 a year. So what I did is I went ahead and just subtracted that out and basically landed on this 1079. What that'll do is that will fund the city's bonded debt. As long as you don't sell any more debt and the mill value doesn't go down, which is both two very large assumptions, then the cities will not have to raise millage to fund its bonded debt. However, you know, the mill value has fluctuated in Columbus historically. You know, over the last 20, 25 years, it's gone up, gone down. Fortunately, over the last 3 years, we've had nominal increases, I would say. Maybe perhaps 4 years we've had nominal increases. So that is how we arrived at the amount to raise the GO bond millage. Anybody have any questions at this point, or should I keep going?
Council, any questions at this point?
The next page shows the original, so this was the original level debt service savings that I mentioned that was originally proposed when we talked with the bond attorneys and Mr. Norris on doing the refund. So that's, if you look in the annual savings, that's how I came up and went ahead and subtracted that out. Again, it's nominal based on assumptions, that the mill value could go up and down, but I included that just for reference on page 4. On page 5, I included a letter just to show you what we receive, the advisory notice from PERS regarding how we set that millage for the disability for firefighters and police officers. It's fairly self-explanatory there. And then that concludes really the supporting documentation of the proposed mill increase for the city. Now, what follows is the proposed school increase, which I've included just because people have asked about it. This is what the city receives from the school. This on page 6 that I've provided. It's their tax request worksheet where they summarize what they're asking the city to fund. And this is my chicken scratch from when I wrote on it. I just photocopied it exactly how it was. You see those pencils. What then we do is then we have to add back the cost of collecting the taxes, okay? And then we also add back the homestead loss. The city is obligated to fund what they ask for. So we have to include those costs because it's net of those costs, what we're required to fund. I took the recommended millage, which you can see in my chicken scratch was $215,000 as provided. I added back the total cost of collections at $146,000. where it says net ad valorem, and you can see what I've totaled it up, divided it out by 215,000, it came up with 51.06 mils. The rest of it is calculated just as it was. Essentially taking the recommended mill value and dividing that out and getting the prescribed number of mills to fund the schools. If you turn over to the next page, I just included their resolution, which is what's signed by the board president and the secretary, which specifies those amounts. And of course, they include an entire budget for us. But then also, just if there's a question, if you flip over on page 8 where it says be it further resolved, it specifies about that the payments to the city school district are net for their operations, principal and interest, etc. That we add the cost of collections and don't pass that on to them. Any questions on that?
We'll give them a little time.
Okay, to digest it, it's a lot.
Is everybody clear on how we came to the numbers for the school board and their request? Is there any questions in the audience?
Will you not be seeing a 13-point drop in the next 3 years in the millage for the schools?
Pardon me?
Can you come up to ask the question so everybody can hear you, please, sir? Thank you. Thank you. So I guess the question is for Mark. Will we not be realizing a 13-point savings in millage in approximately the next 3 years from the schools?
Why?
My understanding, I spoke with Jason Spears today, and he said that, you know, we should be recognizing a lot of reduced debt and reduction within the next 3 years.
Okay, so I'll speak to that just briefly. You know, the city's responsibility vis-a-vis the school district, I mean, the city's officials, being these people here, is to appoint people that they think are responsible fiduciaries for the school district. And the way that they operate, they hire those people, they entrust the school board to then thus hire an executive who is the superintendent. Superintendent and her staff, or his, whoever his case may be, produce a budget based on the operations of the school district. They present that and make that case to their board. Their board sends along their recommendations to us, which they have sent here. The city's responsibility is to levy the millage based on their ask. So that's a long way to answer your question, but the city's responsibility is to appoint responsible people. And if they're not, or they feel that they're not, is to put different people on the board. So whether the school board is to get savings, they very well might, but this body and the city staff doesn't interfere with both their appointees on the school board or the staff, the executive, and the people that run the school. So that may very well be true. I have no earthly idea, I guess, is the question.
Maybe it should have been more of a comment rather than a question. So, but my understanding is that from Jason Spears that we will see a 13-point millage reduction in the next 3 years.
Well, again, if there's a millage reduction, the way we'll see it, and we'll be, well, not we, but this body would see it and have a way to interact with it, is to when they vote to approve the levy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously, we live in a small town. Somebody may say, "Hey, it's going to be lower," but you know, That's the authority of this board or the council.
Maybe I'm just putting it in the ethos that it's out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of confusing because you think that because we're the levying authority, that we have the authority to dictate what the school does, you know, in a one-to-one ratio, which is not true. That's why we have a school board.
Yeah, the simple answer is this body votes on what the school board proposes and sends to us.
And we have to by law. I mean, that's the law, is that they provide their budget and we levy the taxes to support it.
In 3 years, they may have other things that they may be planning. They chose not to raise mills this year, but they may, you know, it may not go down 13, it may go down some, but it may not, because they may have other projects that they may be ready to work on.
That's right.
They chose not to work on to keep the mills down this year.
That's right. So just say hypothetically to Councilman Jones's, you know, what he's saying is that, just say.
Mark, can you repeat what he was saying?
He was saying that even if they have the option hypothetically to decrease the millage by 13 mills, if that is true, we don't know that it is, but if it is true hypothetically, that doesn't mean that they would. They might reduce it by 5, they might reduce it by 8, they might not reduce it at all. There might be other things that they've held off on spending money or asking for because they've been waiting for whatever they need to free up those 13 mills. You know, hypotheticals. So that's what he was saying, and that's true. You know, they're free to do what they want.
The other thing is the school district doesn't operate in mills. They would send a dollar request.
Yes.
So they send it to us in dollars. They don't even think about it in terms of how much mills. I mean, as a functioning operation, the management, and the people that are there, the executives and the financial people, what they're doing is trying to find on a dollar basis what does it take to effectively run a school district, and it's the city's responsibility to fund that request.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Okay, now, just as a reminder, tonight we will vote on the millage increase, but we will not vote on the budget. We will move after we handle this part of the meeting, and then we'll move on to take a motion to discuss the budget, but we won't vote on the budget tonight. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the tax levies that Mark has presented? I have a motion from Councilman Mickens, second from Councilman Beard. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Next on the policy agenda is the discussion of the 2021-2022 proposed budgets. My understanding is all the council members received a draft of the budget earlier today for review. I will now turn the floor over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Delilah Vaughn. Delilah, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before you packet earlier today with 2 scenarios in there. The first scenario in front of you, it provides the suggested budget with a surplus of $127,296. Do you need me to go through each line item to see where we stand? What was requested and what was suggested? If not, we'll look at the second scenario. The second scenario that's presented before you is the second page with a surplus of $549,765. And though in that scenario, we do not have increases proposed in those. So I present these to you today so that you can take a look at it and get more familiar with it. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Is Mark still- while the council is kind of reviewing this, if, Delana, if you and Mark would kind of give, I'd like to, give those that are here, and those that are watching at home, kind of an idea of how once, during the budgeting process of the city, I wanted to try to make it clear as kind of how we do this process. This year, we did a little bit differently, I think, than they have in the past. Either one of you can, if you'll give them an overview of how we did this. One of the things that we did is, Mark and I went to some of the, Mark went to all the departments. I joined him to some of the departments to actually sit down and look at their budget proposals. While we were there, we looked closely at their inventory, what some of their major needs were, trying to get a good understanding of the particular ask from the department heads. Once we did that, they would come back to Mark and Delia with their budget proposals, and then Mark and Delia, and I joined them on a few occasions, sat down and looked at what we could possibly manage from their ask, and then came up with a budget that y'all are looking at tonight. So do y'all want to kind of walk them through? I just did kind of a short scale. Can you kind of explain to them some of the things that you did to get to this point?
Well, the first thing we did was, we went through to calculate the anticipated revenue that we'll receive throughout the year of 2020, 2021. Did the calculation of the anticipated revenue that we'll receive throughout 2021, 2022. And once we got that revenue set in place, we distributed the budget worksheet to the department head so that they can submit to us what their suggested budget, the things that they need or anticipating on purchasing or utilizing throughout the year. Mark met with each department head to get an understanding of their budget and what they're asking for and why. Once Mark got that understanding, Mark and I, along with the mayor, we met and discussed the needs of the city. And we went through to see if we were able to fund it this year or if we'll be able to fund, possibly fund it the next year. If it was something that we saw that we needed at the moment, we included in the budget. If it was not, then we'll possibly try to make the purchase next year. And that's how we arrived at our figures. The anticipated revenue for 2021 is $23,605,175. And the anticipated revenue, this is without the pay increases. The anticipated expenditures is $23,055,410. If we include pay increases, the expenditures would be $23,477,879.
Explain what the pay increase would be and who would be receiving it.
The pay increase would be a 3% increase across the board, excluding the mayor, the council, and the mayor's assistant.
So basically, everybody in the city, except for the mayor and council, and then Angela, my executive assistant, would be getting a 3% pay raise in this budget, proposed budget.
With the first scenario, yes.
How long has it been since our employees have had a raise?
From my understanding, the last pay raise they received was 2017.
So the raises are not coming from the increase in the millage, it is coming from savings throughout the budget.
Throughout the budget that we cut, that's correct.
Versus other places like Starkville, Tupelo.
Please repeat this question, we can't hear it.
He asked if we surveyed where our employees are versus other municipalities that would be similar to us. Only cursorily, I would tell you that we're low. The reason why I know that is I've met with some city officials at Starkville, and we were talking not about that particularly, but about other things, and they were doing a employee salary survey and didn't even include Columbus because we were so far out of their pay distribution.
Them at least a little closer to other areas.
I think we can.
I mean,
I think
looking at-
he said, is there any way we can get them close? I think we can. I think we should. I think some of the things in regards to the budget, I mean, I'm going to say this kind of briefly, but come back to what you said. You know, this budget is born out of us, like Delilah said, going and meeting with the department heads, looking at their needs, necessary items that have either been not funded or known to be funded but pushed off. You know, in my mind, the best thing would be to try to look holistically at the city and start and say, you know, what is an overall plan for the city? Start there. You know, what does the city want to be? And come up with a comprehensive plan for the city, and then how to enact that plan. And as part of that plan, you sit down and say, we know that our employees are behind in pay. And I would say probably at every level they are. I mean, so what is the way to get there? Well, one of the ways to get there is to keep raising taxes. But that is really not a pro-growth policy. And Columbus needs to grow to get out of this slump or to solve a lot of these financial issues. So what's another way to get there? Well, another way to get there is to become more efficient in the operations of the city. And some of the way I think we can become more efficient is just by having a plan that drives the city overall, but filters down to each department. And at that departmental level, you say, how can we make public works more efficient? How can we make the police department more efficient? How can we make the fire department more efficient? Because efficiency is the flip side of making more money. I mean, it's, if you're taking the same amount of inputs, labor, and performing more, you've become more efficient. So if we can do that and start there, I think you could do it in a year. Come up with that plan, do it, and say, what is the goal? If we're at $10.80 and Starkville's at, I think they're at $11.50, say for an entry level laborer at Public Works, you know, how do we get there? How efficient do we have to be to get there? I think doing it now is not financially prudent. I mean, number one, the city can't afford it. But I think setting it as a goal over a period of years, just like the mayor mentioned in the, I guess yesterday, is that the last meeting on developing a capital expenditure plan, you know, developing the plan may take a year or less, but it's going to encompass years. Sitting down and making the plan and say, okay, we want to get, you know, this group of people up by, you know, a quarter or 50 cents, and then these people up by this much. So that's my opinion. I'm not saying you should.
Yeah, let me add to that too, Councilman Jones. I have looked at some of the numbers from other cities. I don't have it with me. We will get that together before, because I think that would be good for the council to see and other citizens. Like, for instance, I've been looking at Hattiesburg's police department, and a few years ago, Hattiesburg put in not only a budgeting plan for salaries for police officers at different levels of experience and time with the force. One of the things they're trying to do is to maintain the good officers that they have. Not only do they have a pay raise incentive so that when someone comes on, they know what level they're working towards, they also have incentives with the local universities there, because sometimes some of the officers may not have a college degree at that point, and it'll give them an opportunity to work on a degree. They have really good, and we have an agreement with MUW right now, but not to the extensive level that Hattiesburg has done with not only USM, but William Carey, that gives their officers, and not just officers, but city employees across the board, to work on degrees while they're with the city. So that's an incentive to stay, right? And then with them also working on higher education or whatever they're doing, it's also a benefit for the city, because there are a lot of times they're taking classes that will help them in their job. So that's one of the things that we need to do long term, is not only figure out a way to make sure that our employees know what a pay scale can be, but also that we try to make a great working environment for them so that they're interested in staying with the city and having an environment that's a positive, but also that feels like the city is investing in them as well. You know, in every walk of life with businesses, you have to find ways to incentivize. It's one of the things that we want to do with our long-term plan for the city. The city has a comprehensive plan and some other documents in place that I've been studying, but one of the things that we've never seemed to have is a plan on how to fund those. It's great to have a plan, but if you don't have a plan to fund it and to take it forward, and you know, a plan like that it needs to be a living document. Things change along the years, but I think we really need to set like a 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 15-year goal for the city, and also have input from citizens like we're trying to do tonight. And then some brainstorming amongst us too in meetings like this to try to move the city in the direction that we all know that it can go. And the budgeting process is a big part of that. And for all of us, especially 3 of us, this is a whole new process for us that you come in and you tackle fairly quickly. People have asked me, are we looking for cost savings within the different departments? Yes, we are. As we've been doing this budget process, we've also been studying job descriptions, talking to folks in department head roles and also in regular employee roles, trying to get officers within the police department, talking to the folks in the fire department. We've talked to everybody in public works and literally in every department that we have in the city. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're as efficient as possible in those areas. And the budget process helps bring some of that to light. And so if you break down some of these areas in the budget, you kind of begin to see our thought process in some of it. One of the things that I'm determined to do as mayor, and I've mentioned this before, that I think will help during the budgeting process, is for us to be more proactive in going for grants at the federal, state, local, and also in the private sector. The fact that the fire department has been very proactive in working with a professional grant writer, brought in a lot of money for the city to purchase the fire truck that we talked about last night. That's going to save the city a lot of money in the long term. We've also had some of our state legislators who've been talking about helping with the fire truck too. So there could be some more savings coming in that way. But we have to have a plan for those things to really work towards it. You know, we need to be planning for, we know these buildings, we're going to have to replace a roof on a building. We got roofs that need to be replaced now. We've known that's coming for quite some time, but we really don't have a plan to pay for that. And that's part of the capital plan that we'll try to put together. So we've got to, and that was a good question that brought us to this point, is that's why it's important that we have meetings like this where we're seriously looking at the numbers and asking hard questions. We have department heads here to answer questions that you might have. Some of the things that we tried to fund in this one, like for instance, are the radios for the police department. That's a life-saving piece of equipment that they needed to have. We fixed it into this budget where we can go ahead and get those, but we're going to be looking for grant dollars to cover those costs too. So some of the numbers that you're seeing in the budget, we're going to try to find that money again from being very aggressive in the grant area too. Would any of y'all like to add to that, or your thoughts on the long-term plan or how we're handling some of this?
3% raise is across the board with everyone, or would it vary with some employees?
That's with everyone excluding the mayor, the council, and
The executive assistant to the mayor.
You know, when I look at you don't have the money, you don't have the money, but when I look at, you're talking about increasing productivity. Well, if you got a person working for the city making $10 and haven't had a raise for 4 years, and you give him 3%, that's an average of 30 cents, which equals to less than 10 cents a year. So how productive can we get with the employees with a 3% pay increase? And I'm sure there are some performing at a higher level than others, so why does it have to be across the board 3%? Can it not vary for more for some and then 3%?
Well, that's a very good question, and one that I discussed with Delia and with Mark. I've also been looking in the performance evaluations for employees. I've not looked at all of them, but I've looked at some, and from the ones that I've read, it would be very hard to determine in some cases, because that's what I ask about. Could we base these on performance? That is always an option, but it's, for me, and y'all explain this if I'm wrong on it, that kind of goes back, Councilwoman Stewart, to what I was saying earlier about putting those incentives in place. It's hard to go back and do it now in the budget time frame that we're working in. What we were trying to do in the end was try to give a raise, and I have concerns about it too, because sometimes these raises, 3% across the board, sometimes it just puts somebody in a different tax bracket. So, you know, they don't necessarily see a raise at all. And, you know, I've been a state employee for most of my career, and I've had some raises that did just that, you know, put me in a different tax bracket. I've been on the receiving end of, you know, incentive raises, and bonus types of raises, and it's hard to find one that is fair across the board, in my opinion. But I agree with you. We need to be looking at ways to try to award performance, and also longevity is another issue. That goes back to a lot of the other things that where you can hopefully, you know, find other perks outside of just pay that would attract people to come. You know, I've had almost without question, every employee that I have talked to during this budgeting process has asked, could we go back to the 4-day week instead of the 5-day? Because, and if you look at the numbers, we've talked about this with HR and other places, how has it affected the city that we've gone back to the 5-day? How has that looked as far as people taking days off? Because a lot of times on the 4-day, people plan for their doctor's appointments and all those things on the Friday. Has it saved us, did it save us on electricity and fuel costs and those types of things? We don't have solid numbers on that, but you would probably assume that it would have saved money having a 4-day week. Some of the questions about that was that people were saying it was inconvenient for, you know, parts of the city not to be open on Friday, but the question to that was, what can we do to make it convenient for people who are trying to pay tickets or fines or different things without having a person in the room? Could we have a drop-off spot? Those types of things. So that's another discussion, but maybe not for today, but I think we need to go back and review, is that something, because it was very popular with employees to have that, and it, you know, of course it didn't work, you know, in every single department, but the majority of the employees had the 4-day work week.
Just piggybacking on what Mrs. Stewart is saying, I mean, I have no problem with the 4 days, but what I have a problem with, the pay is still the same. And I think it's time, I'm looking at McDonald's, I'm looking at Panda and Starks, we're paying $15 an hour now. I'm looking at Kentucky paying $13 to $15 an hour. And we have policemen, 26 firemen making under $12 an hour. 26. And we wonder when we look at the agenda why people are leaving. I think it's imperative that nobody work for the city. I don't know how you can do it, but y'all need to put it together. Pay nobody under $12 an hour. That's my proposal. If we don't have to give nobody else a raise, then fine. For right now, I need everybody brought up to $12 an hour.
I vehemently disagree with that, but I will do it if that's what you want. I think that is a disincentive for the people that make above $12 an hour to stay and work. It's just the flip side of the exact same coin. If you talk about being productive, paying people more when the expectation and the work that's performed is the exact same is the exact opposite of productivity. It makes people, that is from this body and the citizens, paying more and getting the same is the definition of less productivity. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't, I'm not saying that, but I think if you're worried about people leaving, I would propose, if you wanted to do that, to look at a merit-based something. You've got people that have worked for years that perform a good job, that their supervisors know that they've done good, or split it up. Say, we'll give some people this, percentages here. I mean, we know the amount we can operate in, which is $500,000 and some odd $1,000, to split it up right now and do it. I mean, the decision on this to run through this flipper.
And we don't have to make the decision tonight, so this is a good discussion.
The decision on is that, in Mark's opinion, is that, you know, the millage was raised in 17 to give a 4% pay raise.
Across the board?
Across the board. Now, some other people got just boosts and then a 4% pay raise, some specific employees. We're not raising the millage, we're still giving it. It doesn't mean it, I mean, I'm happy to do that, but the decisions to be made are, what are the choices not selected? So if we start, say, IT, big purchases funded by IT were to repair the malfunctioning gas pump at Public Works for people to use. That's the police, fire, Public Works, and Columbus Light Water, $15,000. A piece of equipment from the crime lab that the police department recommended that we're funding. Police radios, $220-some-odd-thousand. Court nominal. Fire department, $180-some-odd-thousand for their self-contained breathing apparatuses. The ones that they have right now, the manufacturer's out of business and they're malfunctioning on the job site, according to the fire chief and other firefighters. Building inspection, nominal increase. Code enforcement, nominal. Street department funding trucks, other equipment, including lawnmowers, weed eaters, blowers, etc., based on the department head's recommendation. Convention center, repairs, defer maintenance and repairs on the truck to continue to make it a viable rental. Care and maintenance, $100-and-some-odd-thousand to replace the police roof that leaks like a sieve, in addition to possibly replacing the strip mall roof. City planning, nominal increase. Community outreach homes, garage, buying a new air conditioning machine and a diagnostic machine so they can fix the air conditioner for the vehicles without sending it off to a third-party service. Appropriations, we met every single appropriation increase that was requested. The cemetery, including grubbing the large ditch through there, and also bush hogging the back of Friendship. The airport, no increase. Debt service, landfill, no increase or nominal increase. Parks and Rec, we funded every single maintenance request from Greg Lewis and Parks and Rec, other than one Kubota something, Greg. But all the roof repairs, goal replacements, everything, because people have complained that the parks look like junky, and it's been a priority, at least in this budget, to get fixed. So those are the things. 70% of the budget without, or 68.5% of the budget without the pay raises is people already, personnel. If you look at this number. Everything else, it's all those items that I added plus all the other miscellaneous spending. So it's gotta come from somewhere, is my point.
Let me ask this question. Councilman was saying that you wanted everybody to be paid at least, what was the number? 12? Where is this going to put us with the 3%? Can you tell us what would be the lowest paid with that? Is that possible?
Not tonight.
We'll get that.
We can look at it.
Yeah, we'll figure out what that would be, Councilman Mickens.
So that increase was just only for people that makes under $12 and nothing for anyone else?
Well, what I
To
was
make
saying,
sure.
what I was curious to know is with the 3% across the board, where would our lowest employee fall at that point as far as their hourly wage?
The lowest right now, I think, is about 10:30, about 10:30, and that's in
Yeah.
one department.
Yeah, 10.60, yeah.
Pay people, get them up to 12, and then maybe 3% for the other people.
We've only got $100-and-some-odd-thousand.
I just said look at it. I didn't say we were going to do it. I said we could look at it.
And here's the other thing that I'm just talking, is that in regards to what Councilman Jones brought up about Startle, and this is not picking on Public Works, but I've worked with them a lot because I've been the department heads, and I believe they can get more efficient and want to get more efficient. They have 52 employees, which includes their Public Works director and street department director. The Public Works director is a certified engineer. They also pick up their own trash. We have 68 on budget. So when we talk about this stuff, it's not analogous across the board.
Right.
It's
Correct.
in population or dimensions.
No, and what they actually doing over there, like you may count in some of the students,
He's talking about how big, well, some of the stuff what I was going back to in this in particular, and this is why I referenced their department. You look at ditches in Columbus, for instance, and the only reason, this is what I did with Public Works before I came up here, we talked about this. Taking people and running people with weed eaters and weed eating ditches, okay? You got a man that you pay, you got equipment that you purchased, you got fuel that goes in the weed eater, and then you got all the repairs that go into repairing that equipment. Just for that one operator that's out there. What if we got a RFP to do spraying of ditches? Identify the ditches sprayed and pick the ones that could be sprayed. What if it reduced some ditches, basically 2 sprays a year, and we didn't have to do anything? What if we could spray the bowls where the bypasses are or roadways where they don't have to cut it? What if it reduced that and just say by 15% on cutting, 20%? That's the efficiency side of it that I'm saying. If you look at that and say, how can we do and perform the same or similar tasks for the citizens cheaper, or in some cases even better, so the dishes aren't, tall, and I'm not picking on them, they've been understaffed. But what if we could do that, perform the same similar service for cheaper, and still get people a pay raise?
All right, well, that's something that we should look at then.
Ditches and places, is this material hazard to the people that are doing the work?
I don't know, they're spraying them and starting.
that would be
My
something we
question
would
is where they doing it. If you're gonna come up with that kind of proposal, you need to make sure it's safe for the employees.
and the environment, yes.
Well, I guess under my scenario, the employees wouldn't do it, it'd be a contract. I understand what you're saying, safe for human beings. Yeah, we would have to do it to follow NDEQ and EPA and.
Too, Mark, is that if we got employees that not working efficiently, it is up to management to train them. You can only do what you're trained to do. If our department is not coming up to efficiency, maybe we need to look at getting people trained, even train the trainer if we're looking for something more efficiency. But I think employees, it is time now that they need to be paid. And even if you paid them 12 hours, dollars an hour, that's still no money for what they do.
Y'all know we get what you pay for, and maybe they're not, doing an even better job because they're not being paid.
Well, what if they are?
What if they are?
Yeah.
Then you start looking at making changes.
But you've already raised the pay to $12 an hour. What are
You
gonna do?
got to start somewhere though. I mean, if people are happy at home, if I can't pay my bills at home, then you think I'm gonna come to work and want to do a good job at work? No. If I'm happy at home and I can pay my bills at home, I'm gonna be happier on my job.
One of the things that we can do too, because these are very good comments from everybody, is that, I think in the past, haven't y'all worked with a budget committee that sat down and worked with y'all with like members of the council on it?
Yes.
I think this would be a good time, especially those of you that are really adamant about more than a 3% raise, that we spend some time with y'all so that y'all can look closely at the numbers with Mark and Delia, and maybe y'all can help, propose a way to get to what you're asking.
And to be clear, I'm not against paying people. It's the opportunity cost, the next best choice not selected. If you give people a pay raise, what is the city giving up? Okay, that's the only thing I'm saying.
I'm just saying we look at it as a whole, though. We look at, the pay, and we look at that and where we can cut and to try to give the good people that we have a raise so that they can feed their families. I mean, you have even Mr. Kelly over here working 2 or 3 jobs in the park, but he's still only being paid, for one job. It's things like that. If we're not able to hire somebody for his job, then we should have been paying him more because he's doing 2 or 3 jobs. It's just things like that where you incentivize people and you'll get, people to do more work.
Do that, I didn't want to call this young man out. I'll go through the ward some days, he's laying concrete. I go through again, he's on a lawnmower. So what is it an employee have to do to receive incentive for working for this city?
Well, the
So
city.
those are the people that I would say you can't just look across the board and say, you get 3% and that's it. We need to find a way to compensate
I agree with you.
employees at different levels
I agree
based
with
on their experience and what they do.
I agree with you. What I would say is that the city, as an entity, has a longstanding problem of not having a plan to A, reward employees based on their performance, and B, of growing and maintaining the city and having more revenue come into the city without raising taxes. And that is the only way to fund and have revenue to pay these people. So right now, we can say these are anecdotal examples. I know Mr. Kelly is a hardworking individual. I've talked with him several times after here. I know many people that work. But again, you've got a finite amount of revenue that's coming in. And if you want to do that, my suggestion would be perhaps let's do what the mayor suggested we've got between now and 2 weeks, is if there's people on the council that would be willing to, take some time. It could be in the, Delina and I would do it in the evenings if you're not available in the day, maybe to get some.
Delilah, because I will tell you that she spends a lot of hours at City Hall. Mark and I don't leave sometimes till after 7, and she's still there, and so is Pat. There are a lot of people who put in a lot of extra hours, but I agree. Y'all need to have more input on it too. I think we're remiss not to also add in, when you're talking about different jobs and what they pay, remember the city has very good benefits too, which is a perk for the employees. A lot of these places that other people work, they don't have as good of benefits as we have, and we're going to be looking soon to try to even see if we can offer even better benefits. And I know that that's not to say that they don't deserve a pay raise, because they do. There's not going to be one person here that would say that these guys and ladies do not need a good pay raise. What we've got to remember is we've also got to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. This is not a private business with our own money. We are stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. So we have to always remember that in the process. Also remember that we've got to be able to do these types of things that y'all are asking for, we've got to have a policy and a plan to do it, and the city currently does not. So I think that's another good reason for, if we can have some council members that would volunteer to be on the committee to look at this a little deeper would be much helpful. You were raising your hand, sir.
My thought process is
Good,
that.
sir, can you come up to the microphone? We can't hear you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
A comment more than anything. My thought process is the situation now, the city has already made good investments by the pay that the people are receiving already. So now it appears to be the time has come for them to pay up. Comment. That's it.
I didn't hear the first part. I didn't understand the first part of this comment. Did y'all? You said something that it's time for the city to pay up. What was the first part? No, but the first. Could you repeat it again? Could y'all understand it? I didn't understand.
You got a situation here where people are working now. They are low paid, they are low on the scale. So now the time has come for the city to at least try to pay up, try to get them to the point that they can make a decent living. I'm listening at $10.80. I mean, what can you do with $10.80? And if you look at a raise in the area of 30-some cents, then if you put 8 hours on that, that doesn't tally up much. What kind of incentive would an individual have to stay on a job like that? They'll stay if they have no other options.
I have a question. How would the projected use of that American Rescue Plan Act money work within this? Because I noticed that we did say that we can get some people up to $13 an hour using some.
Like Mr. Dillon said,
So
we don't
that
have
won't-
anybody that qualifies.
It's one time to do that. Yeah.
So my suggestion is, based on this, a proposal.
I'll be happy to.
Okay, thank you. We had a proposal from Councilman Jones that had some features, a proposal from Councilman Mickens that had some features, and a proposal from Councilwoman Stewart that had some features. To me, if we just kind of see where we can maybe meet in the middle on some of these things, and see where, if there's, rather than waiting until the 15th of September to come back and people don't like it, maybe Councilman Jones has agreed to serve. Is there anybody else that would want to? Okay. Ms. Stewart, Mr. Beard. So I think we can correspond with y'all and set dates and times according to your schedule.
Let's let, about having council members on the committee. Let's
Because
do-
that's the quorum.
Anytime you have a committee meeting, it's gonna be a public meeting anyway. So you can have any number of council members on it. So that's not a problem. Whether you have a quorum or you don't, it's gonna be a public meeting. If you do have a quorum, then you would have the ability to take action. But hopefully you would classify it as some kind of a working meeting unless you're having all council members present.
Yeah, advisory. Does that suit everybody?
Thank y'all for being willing to do that. That's great.
Daytime, not at night.
We will do. Maybe we can just get together after the meeting and kind of.
Mark can take all those out to lunch.
Do we have any other questions? Does anybody in the audience have anything before we wrap things up this evening? Okay, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I'd like to remind everyone that our special meeting next week is on Wednesday, September the 15th, at 5 p.m. in this same location, the upper level of the tribal. That concludes the items on the agenda for this special meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion by Councilman Beard and a second by Councilwoman Stewart to adjourn. All in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, council.